Now I hand over the stage to Mr. Rajinder Bhatia, President of Defence Business at Bharat Forge, to steer the session on Atmanirbhar Bharat with Mr. Mukesh Bopalkar, Head of Business Development and Marketing L&T Defence, Mr. K.T. Atluri, Founder and Joint MD Zen Technologies, and Mr. Vinayak Dalmia, Co-Founder Third Eye Tech.
The topic which has been given to this panel actually is exceedingly interesting. It says powering India's defense sector. Now, we heard that how the geostrategic situation has changed, how there is a revolution on military affairs. At one time when we thought that the conventional weapons are passé, suddenly they have made a comeback. Of course, now we have on top of the conventional weapons something exceedingly new with high technology and add-ons in the form of unarmed weapons and many such new innovations which have changed the scene in the battlefield. There was also a talk that we need to get to become what we were some time ago, which was what was called Vishwaguru. So if we are to get to Vishwaguru, let me just we were told and we have been told that we are now looking at RMA 3.0, which means Revolution in Military Affairs 3.0. The first RMA, actually we missed the bus completely. We kept trying to chase it, but it was a dream a bit too far. RMA 2.0, we did have the wherewithal. We did have the software power, we were very good in IT, we were very good in so-called the fields which were required, but somehow we never could find that particular knowledge getting translated into weapon platforms. Now we are at the verge of RMA 3.0. Interesting part in 3.0 and which is going to be different than the previous ones is, in the past, it was always technology which used to be getting developed for military affairs, which used to find its usage in the private sector. In RMA 3.0, the technology development is happening concurrently in almost every corner. And hence, this technology is now going to find its way into the military hardware. Hence, it is even more important that we do not miss this bus and get onto it. Without talking more about what we are looking at and how we are building up our defense sector, let me introduce the panel, and we have an excellent panel with us. Actually, they represent the complete spectrum of the defense industrial complex. We have Mukesh Bopalkar, which is representing a large Indian company, Larsen and Toubro. We have Kishore Atluri, who represents a medium-sized enterprise, which is running very fast to become a large enterprise. And we have Vinayak Dalmia, who is into a startup space. So we should be able to get a very, I would say, wholesome perspective of the total industry going forward. And before I start asking the questions to the panelists, one last point, any defense industrial complex will have two legs to stand on. One is what we call the military industrial complex consisting of manufacturing ecosystem, and second will be technological ecosystem. And when we talk about technological ecosystem, the key would lie in innovation and breakthrough technologies where startups actually have been at the forefront all over the globe. So let's move on. Since we have only allocated about 30 minutes and I have already taken about 3 of them, so we're left with 27. I'll give you a first opening question, and I would expect all the 3 panelists to give me about their narration in about 3 to 4 minutes. Then we'll have one more round of questions, and which should be able to take us to the end of this panel discussion. So Mukesh, starting with you. Question is that you have seen what all has happened in the space of the reforms, how the industry has shaped in last decade. So what are your impressions about what are the most path-breaking reforms which you have seen in the last few years?
Thank you, sir. So you are very right. As L&T, we have been there in defense for last 40 years. Though within L&T, inside L&T, we have been always called a perpetual startup. even though we may be the largest private sector defense industry. And we have seen the industry evolving through. Like if I see early 2010s or early 2000s, it was more like a direct import, which gradually shifted with the introduction of the DPP. There was a buy global. Then buy global was again, there was one more category, buy and make, but it was global with a DPSU nominated for the production part. And subsequently, the categories get evolved with a more and more emphasis of Indian industry getting involved. So there have been buy Indian over here, there have been make over here, which is emphasizing enough that the Indian industry has to be at the helm of the affairs. They have to develop the technologies, they have to produce the products and sustain it. But I believe the positive list, which bans some of the key items to be imported from outside, that has really enabled the industry to look at the matter in a different way, in a different lens, and become more self-sustainable. So I think that is the key reform, I would say.
Uh, Thank you, Mukesh. Kishorji.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. So, in the reforms, the first and the foremost, I would put it on Buy Indian IDTM, which has come about. And the next would be the Make Two cases. These two reforms have been transformative, to say the least. And after that, the EP, which is being progressed year after the year, they have been really beneficial for the Indian industry. Now, the thing is, as per the DAP, if you go by the standard flowchart, even today it takes the same 7 or 8 years, if you are lucky. But at least now, the default category is by Indian ITTM, which has been transformative. And then, of course, in the Make 2, in the previous era, I've been in this business for close to 30 years, and with the defense from 2006 onwards. At the drop of the hat, the RFP could be cancelled. Now, do happen, but now that is very rare. So, and then the push towards getting the Indian products has been institutionalized now. So everybody, they want Indian product and all. In that way, it is a great step forward for the Indian industry.
Kishore, I would like to kind of highlight one point which you raised, which was very interesting when you talked about emergency procurement. A cycle of procurement in emergency procurement lies anything between 3 to 6 months, whereas a cycle of procurement in normal times lasts anything from 5 years to 10 years or even more. Why is it that we cannot adopt a similar procedure with slight modification to ensure that we are able to supply equipment in quicker time? Your take on it.
So, absolutely right. If at all you remember, except for the last emergency procurement, in the previous emergency procurement, the IFS and the finance was not there, and it was even faster. So, that is one direction we should take. But somehow, they included the finance people this time, and you could see the lesser number were fructified. So, we should have to take, and of course, if you see now the army acquisition, they had done a phenomenal job. So, they had bought so many systems, they are very well aware of the whole process now. I think that's the reason I think we should institutionalize the emergency procurement and all procurement, at least if at all the MOD is not very happy about it, at least the people down, that is the CFA powers with the vice chief and all, and the army commands, should be through army EP kind of a process.
Vinay, coming over to you. So what has been the most path-breaking thing for you in your startup company? And you're the poster boy of startups these days. So let's hear from you what all you have done and what do you think was the greatest enabler in that? Your mic is not working.
Working now? Yeah. So thank you so much for having me here. Army Commander Shri Baba Kalyani, General Shukla, and senior leaders that I've known for years. I think I would like to first talk about a little bit more abstract and then into specifics. I will argue that if India's first Prime Minister freed us politically, our current Prime Minister has freed us psychologically. And I think that is the single biggest reform that he has done, because the step one towards self-reliance has to be self-belief. And if you hear the Prime Minister, whether you hear him on 26 January, if you heard him on 22nd January in Ayodhya, and he says this again and again, yahi waqt hai, sahi waqt hai. Now is the time, now is not the time to hold back. In terms of it, he says this to India's youth. So freeing the mind and having that self-belief, I think, genuinely, I believe, is the first step. I don't think the kind of work we're doing in my company would have been possible to survive and succeed 10 years ago. We have had many vested interests which would have made sure we were done to the ashes. In the specifics and the concrete of reforms, I believe, yes, the DAP reforms are instrumental and game-changing, even for a young company. That's point number one. Point number two, even though the numbers are small to begin with, I think IDEX as a scheme is a game changer. In the current budget, there is now a new increased budget for a 50 crore project under critical technology of IDEX. And that itself, the quantum is a big jump from a 10 crore maximum limit, but the recognition of moving up the value chain and working on critical and emerging technologies under IDEX is, again, a big game changer. And then, of course, the fourth one is the Make Two schemes, which again are game changers even for young companies. Thank you.
Thank you, Vinayak. I think you raised one very important question, which was around IDEX. Just to give you a little figure, at one time, about 2 years ago, the total expenditure of Government of India on IDEX, it has gone up to now 300 crores. At that time was 63 crores, and there were 864 new startups which had started to work. So this was, I think, showing the light at the end of the tunnel, and they suddenly found a program where they could probably bring their ideas and see a product coming out in a very short time. But one point where we have to be a little cautious is that if we do not see all these schemes to the end, and the end means they should have a revenue generation happening very quickly. If that does not happen, this kind of wave which has started will die down as fast as it started. So we have to be a little cautious on IDEX, although I believe it is a game changer, like Vinayak rightly said. Okay, so finding the next round of questions to all of you. Mukesh, if you were given one wish list, what is one change you would like to do to the current system to ensure that we become a global military powerhouse?
So one wish list. It's very tough to have one, but
Give two.
I would say the pace of procurement needs to be very, very fast, and since the procurement is happening through India, through Indian companies are here to stay, so that matter of trust has to be there on the companies. The procurement process has to be very fast, as everybody highlighted. The fastest procurement cycle we have seen is 7 years, and that is the fastest, and we are still waiting to break that record. So if anything can happen faster than that, that would be much ideal for all of us. And the second wish list is we really need to invest in the R&D, like the Make One programs, which had started way back in 2010 with the first wave of the programs. But somehow that wave is not sustained. And today, if that program would have gone through in 2010, we would have been rolling out the product, we would have been more Atmanirbhar and self-sufficient. So we need to seriously look at these fundings, like sir talked about GFR. There is also quality come cost basis evaluation. So we need to look at the acquisition process more innovatively to suit the armed forces requirements, because in 7 years the technology gets obsolete. By the time you start inducting, you have to do a FOPM and then you have to again undergo all the trials and the cycle continues. So we have to look at it differently. We have to invest in R&D and we have to accelerate the process. These will be the two wishes, sir.
So your wish revolves around cutting down the acquisition cycle. Just to give you one example, one of the products which our company exported, right from generation of an idea to building the product, internal testing, testing by the customer, and manufacture was less than 24 months. And it was not a small platform, it is a gun platform. So if really will is there, I think all these things can happen. Kishore, your views on one path-breaking change you would look for?
So you have,
Yeah, it's working.
so you have, I think, chapter 10 as fast track process and chapter 2 as the regular process. If we can swap these two chapters, I think that would be fantastic. So that's one, because the emergency procurement, we are saying everything is happening as per the regular process. There are trials, there are demonstrations, there's a contract preparation, the CNC, everything happens in the same space of time. So we can just swap that. So that's one good way. And next is, of course, the R&D expenditure and the orders, which till even now, the government favors the PSUs and the DRDO. So we should do something that, no, you got 1 lakh crores. Just imagine if you give that kind of a R&D development for the private industry, it will be transformational.
Yeah.
Things can, instead of giving big orders, now HAL, it has become bigger than Rafael in the market cap. Okay. So instead of that, if at all you could have given to any of the big like L&T or Tatas and all. So one thing we always miss, I don't know, there are only two stakeholders in this one. Okay, one is the industry, private industry. The next is the army or the defense forces. And all the other people are facilitators. So unfortunately, the facilitators have become more important than the actual stakeholders. We have got the skin in the game. Okay. So this shift should be there. That's what I hope for.
Vinayak, your turn for one change you would look for.
So I come from Delhi, and there is a joke in the industrial circle in Delhi, and we call it death by file noting. Anybody who has worked with government will be very acutely aware of that. But on a more serious note, I think if I may take the liberty of two recommendations. One is that our requirements should be driven by ConOps. Currently, you know, when you talk about PSQRs, when you talk about RFP, that Sir was also mentioning, we're stuck in a 1970 era, and we just look at certain specifications without really understanding the concept of operations. Especially when you talk about critical and emerging technologies, they have to be driven by ConOps and not by the old way of doing RFPs and PSQRs. Elon Musk says this very interestingly, that he says, look at military requirements as merely as a guiding principle and not as a dictum, because if you do that, it's not possible to innovate. I can give you many examples. For example, we're working on, amongst other things, proximity fuses. Now, the old requirement is that every single subcomponent of the proximity fuse has to be tested for vibration. But actually, that's not necessary. What you should be testing for vibration is the final product. And if the final product works on vibration, and do it 100,000 times, it doesn't matter. That's all that should be needed. So that's the first thing. I remember I was talking to Admiral Karambir very recently, and he was talking with Eric Schmidt. Even in the US, they have the same problem, and he said they're trying to get to, for emerging technologies, a single-page RFP. And I merely joked, anybody who's able to do that will win the Pulitzer, because it's a really hard thing to do. But that's what we should aspire for. That's the first point. And I think the second, sir, recommendation, and this is an onus on all of us in industry, is we should be more ambitious on critical technologies. In my humble opinion, sir, I don't think India can absorb 100 quadcopter startups. We need to get more ambitious in the kinds of technologies that we want to build for our country. Thank you.
I was there in the same place where Admiral KB didn't mention a single page RFP. Well, single page RFP may not be possible, but a 2-page can certainly be there. So we can start looking at cutting down that getting to performance parameters rather than parameters which are more fixed. So there are many other changes which can be done. So the key point which is actually emerging is that we need to believe in ourselves. I think, like Prime Ministers have often been saying, this is the time for our nation. We are in that Kal which is called Amrit Kal, and where we are poised to grow. I think all the wherewithal and all the blocks have come around. All we need to do is, like a jigsaw puzzle, put them all together and make a picture of a very strong, vibrant India, which is not dependent on imports of technology from any other country. So with these words, we have been told that we have to close the session. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mukesh. Thank you, Kishore. Thank you, Vinayak. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sirs. May I now request Lieutenant General S.L. Narasimhan and Mr. Rajan Arya to kindly felicitate the speakers. Mr. Rajinder Bhatia. Mr. Mukesh Bopalkar. Mr. K.D. Atluri. And Mr. Vinayak Dalmia. Thank you, sirs.